Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Before we get to today's topic, which is about think real hard before you marry a guy with ADHD, to which some of the women listeners are like, too late, but I do have a lot of single and dating listeners who it could be useful for, as well as I will certainly touch upon what to do if you already find yourself in this pickle. But before we do any of that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode is on when you are smarter than your spouse, when a man feels like that and when a woman feels like that, and what to do about it, and what other variables may be at play, and is this even really the case? I mean, like, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not, and we'll talk about all of that on the subscriber episode. Okay, so why do I say think real hard before you marry a guy with ADHD? Because I see a lot of people in counseling where the guy has ADHD. A lot. I see some where the woman does. It doesn't usually go as bad, but it goes a lot worse when the guy has ADHD than when the woman does. Why? Well, before anything, if you do like to read, you should be reading The ADHD Effect on Marriage. If you are married to somebody with ADHD or if you are dating somebody with ADHD. That's a good book and everybody always likes it. So get it. Anyway, so what does it look like for a guy to have ADHD and how does that manifest within the relationship? Well, first of all, they're really disorganized, and their house usually is a fucking disaster. And, you meet them, they haven't gone to like the doctor or the dentist in like 3 years or something. And like all their shit's always in disarray. They can't plan. They're always flying by the seat of their pants. But in the dating phase, they're super charming because of the hyper-focused courtship. And I have 2 podcasts on ADHD, which you should have listened to prior to this if you're a longtime fan. But if not, again, type ADHD into the Spotify search engine at the very top on the app of my podcast. Scroll all the way to the top, then you get a search bar. You type in ADHD. And anyway, so one of the big signifiers and something that you'll read about in that book, The ADHD Effect on Marriage by Melissa Orlov, if you buy it, is the hyper-focused courtship. So people with ADHD, it's like their brain is always sleeping. It's understimulated. So they need extra stimulation to behave normally. So what does this mean? It means that when you are, in the honeymoon stage, you are the extra stimulation. You are super extra stimulating. You're like their drug. They may even say that. Some women remember the guy saying that. And it's real. Everybody loves that stage and the oxytocin and the adrenaline and your hormones are pumping and dopamine is flooding your synapses. However, the people with ADHD love that even more because their brain is chronically understimulated. So they are you are like their Adderall, like they're focused on you. You could later see this with video games, like they get super into video games or super into work if they're not a video game guy, or into like exercise or something. They go down these rabbit holes, which is why frequently their wives are so mad. And they're like, you don't have ADHD. You could focus real well if you like something. If you're into it, then you're fine. So fuck you. You don't have ADHD. But they don't realize that they're basically saying, aha, you have ADHD. You can only focus when you really like something. Because that's one of the major things with ADHD is you cannot focus on boring shit. The boring stuff feels physically painful. Like you're so bored in class, like as a kid, let's say, when it's going slowly that you just want to die. Like that level of boredom is generally associated with ADHD. And as much as your husband loves you, if he has ADHD and it's not treated, and we'll get into treatment in a sec, then once you're out of the honeymoon stage, you are boring, you're just boring. You're always up his ass about stuff, talking about the fucking Google Calendar, blah, blah, blah. It's like Charlie Brown when his mother was talking. And unless you're screwing him or you're fighting with him, he cannot pay attention. And that's a shitty way to live. And the drama is something that a lot of people don't even realize is part of ADHD. He may not want to fight with you at all, but it's like he'll basically fall asleep during a conversation if there's no drama. So subconsciously, both of you create drama basically to keep him even engaged at all. So a lot of women, when I say that, it's like a light bulb goes off and they're like, oh my God, I've said that for years. I've said, you only listen to me when I'm threatening to leave you. And it's true, because that is literally when she comes out of rah, 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 rah phase into something that he can focus on. So what is treatment for ADHD? Stimulants, Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin, things like that. But, just like everything, what do I always say? There's no free lunch, right? So people get used to these levels. And this is sometimes people go on drug holidays, so they go off for a little while, and then they go back on to see if to see if it works the same way again when they restart it. But like any drug, you get used to it. This happens with antidepressants too. After like a few years, sometimes they just stop working for people. And this is not massively publicized in the pharma industry, obviously. So, but, going on Adderall can be fucking transformative for guys with ADHD. And that initial, basically honeymoon stage of being on stimulants can really make the woman realize two things. A, yeah, it was ADHD. It wasn't just that he was a dickwad all along. And, B, like, wow, he can actually do like a lot of stuff, like when he's medicated, he can act more like a really active, proactive, collaborative member of a couple. And so a lot of these guys, by the way, have been medicating all along. They've been either drinking lots and lots of coffee, lots and lots of soda, and sometimes they have recreationally taken Adderall or Red Bull. I mean, they know, their brain instinctively knows it does better with a stimulant, or else they're doing like a lot of dopamine releasers, like running for, miles and miles and miles, or jujitsu, or, something that's like martial arts, because they're like fighting people. So then their adrenaline is ramped up, or they're in some kind of a job where they're like doing sales calls all over the state, or they're an entrepreneur. So like, or they're an ER doctor. These are all real common for guys with ADHD because something's always happening. There's always a crisis. What do they never become? Accountants. They never become accountants. They never become like high school history teachers. They don't become things where you need to be calm and even keel and pretty much do the same thing all the time. They can't do those. Those are very, very hard for them. Frequently, even sitting at a desk is hard, but they could do it if there's like a lot of shit going on. So it's like a video game on the screen, a lot of money's going to be lost or gained. So there's like a lot of adrenaline, or human life is at risk if they're a doctor. So they have always basically been medicating with dopamine, and a lot of them with sex, because they could go down, like a regular guy, go into a porn rabbit hole for like, half an hour. A guy with ADHD that's untreated can look at porn for like 6 hours, because it's so stimulating, and his brain only feels good when it's really stimulated like that. So it's very interesting really to think about, because you may have always thought that this guy's an addict and an asshole, and he may be an addict and an asshole. I don't know your individual situation, but if he has ADHD that's untreated, his brain has always just been gravitating toward things that could really medicate him pretty much. So then why did I title this Think Real Hard Before You Marry a Guy with ADHD? Because, you know what? People don't like to be on stimulants all the time. Sometimes they stop working. Sometimes the guy says, fuck you, what about me in my natural state? And really, it doesn't get rid of everything. Medication is not a panacea. For some, it can be, some lucky people. But as I said, people get inured to the effects, et cetera, et cetera. You got to think really hard before you get invested with somebody who has any sort of mental health issue. That is just the truth. It is not being, it's practical, right? So if somebody struggles with debilitating depression and you are deciding whether or not to date them, that would not be in the plus column. And I say that as somebody who has struggled with depression. It's not like that's not a great thing for an incipient relationship, right? And ADHD makes women feel, when their husband has it, it makes women feel very alone. It's very hard to partner with somebody who can't keep themselves organized, who like loses track of shit, who you have to be up their ass all the time, over and over, saying the same things, who you have to say, can you buy this cereal? And he'll go to the store and not buy any cereal, And so these are the guys where the women are right, when they're saying, so sometimes it's like, the woman's standards are just not obtainable. He's doing like all this shit around the house and it's still not good enough because she's anxious. Now, interestingly, guys with ADHD partner with women who are anxious, as I discussed in a previous podcast, but that's because these women are super also like conscientious and on top of shit to like a pathological degree. So it like compensates for somebody who is not on top of shit at all. But as I was saying, there's a lot of women who their standards are way, way, way too high and they're like way too micromanagey about everything. But like there's also women that are coupled with guys with ADHD that they're like, he lives in filth. Like I got to remind him to brush his teeth. You know, I have to like remind him to go to work. He's like never planning ahead for anything. I have to schedule anything that I want him to do. And then I have to call him and make sure that he does it. Something like his own root canal, you know, with his toothache, he still doesn't like think about going. So yes, you're codependent if you're in that sort of situation, but also you're trying to make your marriage work, you know, and it's like, it's a real hard road to hoe, really. I mean, I see lots and lots of women in this situation where at first the guy wasn't, quote, as bad. And also they were young and ignored the red flags that he was. So like, for example, his house was like a total literal shithole with like fucking bugs, but he was hyper focused on her and very sweet and loving and remembered everything she said. Because again, remember, she was the drug in that early phase. And so she thought, all right, well, I can clean a room. I can clean a house. I can hire a housekeeper one day or whatever the case may be. But then after the courtship, not only is he still, you know, like a pack rat to the nth degree, and that's even just the least of it, but also he doesn't focus on her anymore. So then it's like the whole reason, the thing that was compensating for the ADHD behaviors isn't there either. So that's what you have to think about. If you are dating a guy with ADHD, kind of wait long enough to marry him that he's come out of the hyper-focused courtship, that he's got like a new job and that's what he's hyper-focusing on, or like he's training for a marathon and that's what he's focusing on. So if you marry a guy with ADHD after like 12 months, you're not going to ever have seen them outside of the hyper-focused courtship. You're not going to know what's coming down the pike, potentially. And this is, of course, easier said than done. But there are at least some women that are on the precipice of like thinking, should I be with this guy? He has untreated ADHD or even treated ADHD and he's all over the place. And, you know, I have a whole post like when you thought it was cute to take care of the guy that you were dating and then you stopped thinking it's cute. Like a lot of those guys have untreated ADHD or treated ADHD, but treatment just doesn't work that well. So, and ADHD is also comorbid with depression, anxiety, like just a lot of stuff. We don't know very much about the brain and mental health, you know. That's like a growing field of exploration. We know very little. Psychiatrists even know very little about why medications work. But what we do know is that when you have one disorder, you're pretty likely to have other disorders. So this addiction is another big one with ADHD. Porn addiction, gambling addiction. It's like anything that keeps your brain like active, alive, stimulated, sex addiction, etc. So, you know, it's really just something to think about, you know, and if you are single after divorce and you're dating and somebody is like really like fun and has ADHD and he's like all over the place and he's like so different than whoever your staid, boring husband used to be, there's again, no free lunch, and understand what this may look like later on. And it doesn't mean that, you know, everybody would make the same decision. But if even one person thinks about a decision longer, it's the same thing as like really like we could like zoom it out on a macro level. If there are a lot of red flags, but how much the person loves you compensates, recognize they're not going to love you like the honeymoon stage forever. So if a woman struggles with bad depression and she's like always kind of laying around and really has no energy and you have to do everything for her, and but she's really, really loving and appreciative and you have sex, well, what's that going to look like when you have less sex and you've worn off like the honeymoon stage sheen? Are you going to want to lay around and watch reality TV and go to sleep early because that's how she is? You know, are you going to want to? No, Frequently, no. So some people, yes, but some people, no. So as always, I just kind of want you guys to be aware that there is a very definite honeymoon stage. In the case of ADHD, it's called the hyperfocus courtship, but it's there for everything. And if you have issues with somebody and they're struggling with whatever mental health issues, you got to kind of really look at what that's going to look like down the line. So if a woman says something like, I have like OCD or I have generalized anxiety disorder, don't just be like, oh, well, you know what? I can come in and fix that and help that and it'll be all better for her. Actually research what the fuck that looks like and think about it really, really clearly. Really, really clearly. And if you're thinking, well, nobody's actually going to do that because everybody, when they're in the in love stage, it doesn't matter. That's not true. I have clients who are single and they come in and we talk about red flags and they actually, frequently they're divorced people, they actually say things like, you know what? Actually, now that we're talking about it, it looks like a lot of red flags. And I'm just kind of not interested anymore when I'm feeling like there's so many goddamn red flags and I don't want to replicate my old marriage. So change is possible. And young people, it's harder, because they haven't ever had anything not work out really romantically. So it's all potential to work out and they're optimistic. But at least people that have, previously been in a relationship that hasn't worked out are hopefully more humble and more practical and realize that they may not be thinking clearly in the earliest dating phases and some things may just not be worth it long term and have a much lower likelihood of working out. So this may be one of them. All right, I hope that you found this interesting. And if you are in a relationship, you are already married to a husband with ADHD, I hope that this has convinced you, if nothing else, that y'all ought to be in couples counseling because it is a tough path, and it is a tough dynamic and it can lead to codependency and overfunctioning in the other partner. It could exacerbate anxiety that they may have come to the table with anyway. And the person with ADHD can learn to stay on medication if it's working or go on medication if they're not tried medication, or just honestly to empathize and understand what it is like to be with them and that perhaps they need to be engaging in some coaching or some individual work to help them get some more of their shit in order so that they are easier to deal with for the spouse, for you. And of course, you would have to work on your own, again, tendencies toward overfunctioning and codependency. All right. And it's not like the people with ADHD, by the way, that come into couples counseling, like we're just like, oh, fuck it, y'all should get divorced. Like, it's totally not like that. Obviously, a lot of those couples end up doing a lot better, as many do in couples counseling. Not everybody, but many. So it's not like a death sentence, but it's one of those things where if you haven't really thought about it and it's still just one of those cute little quirks that your boyfriend has, I'm entreating you to think about it a little bit differently. As I would if, for example, it was like a cute little quirk that your boyfriend drank all day, all the time. Not a cute quirk, And there's a lot of women that can attest to that met and married the guy who was drinking all the time in college and he never stopped. All right, talk to y'all soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.